Aho, mitakuye, I say. Hello, all my relations. How y'all doing? My name is the Lucky Coyote, and today we are going to be reading some more Brothers Grimm. So I hope y'all enjoy that. It is raining cats and dogs outside, and I am a very soaked coyote. I just got done working less than an hour ago, and it was pouring rain for the last 15 minutes of it. Like a drowned rat. Yeah. I need some more weather protection, really. But I want to thank you all for coming out. Weather protection. Stop that. No muting. No doubles playing the stream. So, the first story we're going to read is called The Knapsack, the Hat, and the Horn, which I have never read before, so I know nothing about it. But I hope y'all will enjoy that. So let's get to her. I hope you all have a good weekend too. I know I will. I'm going to relax so much this weekend. Here we go. The Knapsack, the Hat, and the Horn. Once upon a time, there were three brothers who every day sank deeper and deeper in poverty, until at last their need was so great that they were in danger of death from starvation, having nothing to bite or break. So they said to one another, "We cannot go on in this way. We had better go forth into the wide world and seek our fortunes." With these words, they got up and set out, and traveled many a long mile over green fields and meadows without happening with any luck. Hi, Connie. Appreciate the lurk. Does remind me I need to mute the alerts, just in case. One day, they arrived in a large forest, and in the middle of it they found a hill, which, on their nearer approach, they saw was all silver. At this sight, the eldest brother said, "Now I have met with my expected good fortune, and I desire nothing better." And so saying, he took as much of the silver as he could carry, and turned back again to his house. The others, however, said, "We desire something better than mere silver." And they would not touch it, but went further on. After they had traveled a couple of days longer, they came to another hill, which was all gold. There the second brother stopped, and soon became quite dazzled at the sight. "What shall I do?" he said to himself. "Shall I take as much gold as I can, that I may have enough to live upon, or shall I go further still?" At last he came to a conclusion, and, putting what he could in his pockets, he bade his brother goodbye and returned home. The third brother said, however, "Silver and gold I will not touch. I will seek my fortune yet. Perhaps something better than all will happen to me." So he traveled along for 3 days alone, and at the end of the third he came to a great forest, which was a great deal more extensive than the former, and so much so that he could not find the end, and, moreover, he was almost perished with hunger and thirst. He climbed up a high tree to discover if he could by chance find an outlet to the forest, but so far as his eyes could reach, There was nothing but treetops to be seen. His hunger now began to trouble him very much, and he thought to himself, "Could I now, only for this once, have a good meal, I might get on." Scarcely were the words out of his mouth when he saw, to his great astonishment, a napkin under the tree, spread over with all kinds of good food, very grateful to his senses. "Ah, this time," thought he, "my wish is fulfilled at the very nick." And, without any consideration as to who brought or who cooked the dishes, he sat himself down and ate to his heart's content. When he had finished, he thought it would be a shame to leave such a fine napkin in the wood, so he packed it up as small as he could and carried it away in his pocket. After this he went on again, and as he felt hungry towards evening, he wished to try his napkin, and, spreading it out, he said aloud, "I should like to see you again, spread with cheer." And scarcely had he spoke, when as many dishes as there was room for stood upon the napkin. At the sight he exclaimed, "Now you are dearer to me than a mountain of silver and gold, for I perceive you are a wishing cloth." But, however, he was not yet satisfied, but would go further and seek his fortune. The next evening came up with a charcoal burner, who was busy with his coals, and who was roasting some potatoes at his fire for his supper. "Good evening, my black fellow," said our hero. "How do you find yourself in your solitude?" "One day is like another," replied he, "and every night potatoes. Have you a mind for some? If so, be my guest." "Many thanks," replied the traveler, "but I will not deprive you of your meal. You did not reckon on having a guest, but, if you have no objection, you shall yourself have an invitation to supper." "Who will invite me?" asked the charcoal burner. "I do not see that you have got anything on you, and there is no one in a circuit of 2 hours' walk who could give you anything." "And yet there shall be a meal," returned the other, "better than you have ever seen." So saying, he took out his napkin, and spreading it on the ground, said, "Cloth, cover thyself." And immediately meats boiled and baked, as hot as if just out of the kitchen, were spread about. The charcoal burner opened his eyes wide, but did not stare long, but soon began to eat away, cramming his black mouth as full as he could. When they had finished, the man, smacking his lips, said, "Come, your cloth pleases me. It would be very convenient for me here in the wood, where I have no one to cook. I will strike a bargain with you. There hangs a soldier's knapsack, which is certainly both old and shabby, but it possesses a wonderful virtue, which, as I have no more use for, I will give you in exchange for your cloth." "But first I must know in what this wonderful virtue consists," said the traveler. "I will tell you," replied the other. "If you tap thrice with your fingers upon it, out will come a corporal and 6 men, armed from head to foot, who will do whatsoever you command them." "In faith," cried our hero, "I do not think I can do better. Let us change." And, giving the man his wishing cloth, he took the knapsack off its hook and strode away with it on his back. He had not gone very far before he wished to try the virtue of his bargain, so he tapped upon it, and immediately the 7 warriors stepped before him, and the leader asked his commands. "What does my lord and master desire?" "March back quickly to the charcoal burner and demand my wishing cloth again," said our hero. The soldiers wheeled round to the left, and before very long they brought what he desired, having taken it from the collier without so much as asking his leave. This done, he dismissed them and travelled on again, hoping his luck might shine brighter yet. At sunset, he came to another charcoal burner, who was also prepping his supper at the fire, and asked, "Will you sup with me? Potatoes and salt without butter is all I have. Sit down if you choose." "No," replied the traveller. "This time you shall be my guest." And he unfolded his cloth, which was at once spread with the most delicate fare. They ate and drank together, and soon got very merry. And when their meal was done, the charcoal burner said, "Up and above there on that board lies an old worn-out hat, which possesses the wonderful power, if one puts it on and presses it down on his head, of causing, as it were, 12 field pieces to go off, one after the other, and shoot down all that comes in their way. The hat is of no use to me in that way, and therefore I should like to exchange it for your cloth." "Oh, I have no objection to that," replied the other. And taking the hat, he left his wishing cloth behind him. But he had not gone very far before he tapped on his knapsack, and bade the soldiers who appeared to fetch it back from his guest. "Ah," he thought to himself, "one thing happens so soon upon another that it seems as if my luck would have no end." And his thoughts did not deceive him, for he had scarcely gone another day's journey when he met with a third charcoal burner, who invited him, as the others had, to a potato supper. However, he spread out his wishing cloth, and the feast pleased the charcoal burner so well that he offered him in return for his cloth a horn, which had still more wonderful properties than either the knapsack or the hat. For when one blew it, every wall and fortification fell down before its blast, and even whole villages and towns were overturned. For this horn he gladly gave his cloth, but he soon sent his soldiers back for it, and now he had not only that, but also the knapsack, the hat, and the horn. "Now," said he, "I am a made man, and it is high time that I should return home and see how my brothers get on." When he arrived at the old place, he found his brothers had built a splendid palace with their gold and silver, and were living in clover. He entered their house, but because he came in with a coat torn to rags, the shabby hat upon his head, and the old knapsack on his back, his brothers would not own him. They mocked him, saying, "You pretend to be our brother. Why, he despised silver and gold, and sought better luck for himself. He would come accompanied like a mighty king, not as a beggar." And they hunted him out of the doors. This treatment put the poor man in such a rage that he knocked upon the knapsack so many times till 150 men stood before him in rank and file. He commanded them to surround his brother's house, and 2 of them to take hazel sticks and thrash them both until they both knew who he was. They set up a tremendous howling, so that the people ran to the spot and tried to assist the 2 brothers, but they could do nothing against the soldiers. By and by the king himself heard the noise, and he ordered out a captain and troop to drive the disturber of the peace out of the city. But the man with his knapsack soon gathered together a greater company, who beat back their captain and his men, and sent them home with bleeding noses. At this the king said, "This vagabond fellow shall be driven away." And the next day he sent a larger troop against him, but they fared no better than the first. The beggar, as he was called, soon ranged more men in opposition, and, in order to do the work quicker, he pressed his hat down upon his head a couple of times, and immediately the heavy guns began to play and soon beat down all the king's people and put the rest to flight. "Now," said our hero, "I will never make peace till the king gives me his daughter to wife, and he places me upon the throne as ruler of his whole dominion." This vow, which he had taken, he caused to be communicated to the king, who said that his daughter, "Must is a hard nut to crack. What is there left to me but that I do as this man desires? If I wish for peace and to keep the crown upon my head, I must yield." So the wedding was celebrated, but the princess was terribly vexed that her husband was such a common man, and wore not only a very shabby hat, but also carried about with him everywhere a dirty old knapsack. She determined to get rid of them, and day and night she was always thinking how to manage it. It struck her suddenly that perhaps his wonderful power lay in the knapsack. So she flattered, caressed him, saying, "I wish you would lay aside that dirty knapsack. It becomes you so ill that I am almost ashamed of you." "Dear child," he replied, "this knapsack is my greatest treasure. As long as I possess it, I do not fear the greatest power on earth." And he further told her all its wonderful powers. When he had finished, the princess fell on his neck as if she would kiss him, but she craftily untied the knapsack and, loosening it from his shoulders, ran away with it. As soon as she was alone, she tapped upon it and ordered the warriors who appeared to bind fast her husband and lead him out of the royal palace. They obeyed, and the false wife caused other soldiers to march behind, who were instructed to hunt the poor man out of the kingdom. It would have been all over with him had he not still possessed the hat, which he pressed down upon his head as soon as his hands were free, and immediately the cannons began to go off and demolished all before them. The princess herself was at last obliged to go and beg pardon of her husband. He at last consented to make peace, being moved by her supplications and promises to behave better in the future. And she acted so lovingly and treated him so well for some time after that he entrusted her with the secret, that although he might be deprived of the knapsack, yet so long as he had the hat, no one could overcome him. As soon as she knew this, she waited until he was asleep, and then stole away the hat, and caused her husband to be thrown into a ditch. The horn, however, was still left to him, and in a great passion he blew upon it such a blast that in a minute down came tumbling the walls, forts, houses, and palaces, and buried the king and his daughter in the ruins. Luckily he ceased to blow for want of breath, for he had kept it up any longer, all the houses would have been overturned, and not one stone left upon another. After this feat, nobody dared to oppose him, and he set himself up as king over the whole country. Thus ends the knapsack, the hat, and the horn. This next story is a very famous one, which I think you all should know. It is, let's see if I got that right. That's right. Rumpelstiltskin. So let us continue. Rumpelstiltskin by the brothers Grimm. There was once a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter, and one day, having to go to speak with the king, he said, in order to make himself appear of consequence, that he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold. The king was very fond of gold, and thought to himself, "That is an art which would please me very well." And so he said to the miller, "If your daughter is so very clever, bring her to the castle in the morning, and I will put her to the proof." As soon as she arrived, the king led her into a chamber which was full of straw, and, giving her a wheel and a reel, he said, "Now set yourself to work, and if you have not spun this straw into gold by early hour tomorrow, you must die." With these words he shut the room door and left the maiden alone. There she sat for a long time, thinking how to save her life, for she understood nothing of the art whereby straw might be spun into gold, and her grief became stronger and stronger, till at last she began to weep. All at once the door opened, and in stepped a little man, who said, "Good evening, fair maiden. Why do you weep so sore?" "Ah," she replied, "I must spin this straw into gold, and I am sure I don't know how." The little man asked, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" "My necklace," said the maiden. The dwarf took it, placed it in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the bobbin was full. Then he set up another, and whir, 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 thrice round again, and a second bobbin was full. And so he went all night long, until all the straw was spun and the bobbins were full of gold. At sunrise the king came, very much astonished to see his gold, the sight of which gladdened him, but did not make his heart less covetous. He caused the maiden to be led into another room, still larger, full of straw, and then he bade her spin it into gold during the night if she valued her life. The maiden was again quite at a loss what to do, but while she cried, the door opened suddenly, as before, and the dwarf appeared and asked her what she would give him in return for his assistance. "The ring off my finger," she replied. The little man took the ring and began to spin at once, and by the morning all the straw was changed to glistening gold. The king was rejoiced above measure at the sight of this, but still he was not satisfied, but, leading the maiden into another, still larger room full of straw as the others, he said, "This you must spin during the night, but if you accomplish it, you shall be my bride." "For," thought he to himself, "a richer wife thou canst not have in all the world." When the maiden was left alone, the dwarf again appeared, and asked for a third time, "What will you give me to do this for you?" "I have nothing left I can give you," sighed the maiden. "Then promise me your firstborn child if you become queen," said he. The miller's daughter thought, "Who can tell if that will ever happen?" And, ignorant how else to help herself out of her trouble, she promised the dwarf what he desired, and he immediately set about and finished the spinning. When morning came, and the king found all he had wished for done, He celebrated his wedding, and the fair miller's daughter became queen. About a year after the marriage, when she had ceased to think about the little dwarf, she brought a fine child into the world, and suddenly, soon after its birth, the very man appeared and demanded what she had promised. The frightened queen offered him all the riches of the kingdom if he would leave her child. But the dwarf answered, "No, something human is dearer to me than all the wealth of the world." The queen began to weep and groan so much that the dwarf pitied her and said, "I will leave you 3 days to consider. If you, in that time, discover my name, you shall keep your child." All night long the queen racked her brains for all the names she could think of, and sent a messenger through the country to collect far and wide any new names. The following morning came the dwarf, and she began with Caspar, Melikor, Balthazar, all the odd names she knew, but at each the little man exclaimed, "That is not my name." The second day the queen inquired of all her people for uncommon and curious names, and called the dwarf Ribs of Beef, Sheepshank, Whalebone, but at each he said, "That is not my name." The third day the messenger came back and said, "I have not found a single new name, but as I came to a high mountain near the edge of the forest, where foxes and hares say good night to each other, I saw there a little house, and before the door a fire was burning, and round this fire a very curious little man was dancing on one leg and shouting, 'Today I stew, and then I'll bake. Tomorrow I shall the queen's child take. Ah, how famous it is that nobody knows that my name is Rumpelstiltskin.'" When the queen heard this, she was very glad, and now she knew the name, and soon after came the dwarf and asked, "Now, my lady queen, what is my name?" First she said, "Are you called Conrad?" "No." "Are you called Hal?" "No." "Are you called Rumpelstiltskin?" "A witch has told you! A witch has told you!" shrieked the little man, and stamped his right foot so hard in the ground with rage that he could not draw it out again. Then he took hold of his left leg with both hands, and pulled away so hard that his right came off in the struggle, and he hopped away, howling terribly. And from that day to this, the queen has heard no more of her troublesome visitor. Thus ends the tale of Rumpelstiltskin. This next story is entitled Roland. So let us begin. Roland by the brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there lived a real old witch who had 2 daughters, one ugly and wicked, whom she loved very much, because she was her own child, and the other fair and good, whom she hated because she was her stepdaughter. One day the stepchild wore a very pretty apron, which so pleased the other that she turned jealous and told her mother she must and would have the apron. "Be quiet, my child," said she. "You shall have it. Your sister has long deserved death. Tonight, when she is asleep, I will come and cut off her head.
but take care that you lie nearest the wall, and push her quite to the side of the bed."
Luckily, the poor maiden hid in a corner, heard this speech, or she would have been murdered. But all day long she dared not go out of doors, and when bedtime came, she was forced to lie in the place fixed for her. But happily the other sister soon went to sleep, and then she contrived to change places and get quite close to the wall. At midnight, the old witch sneaked in, holding in her right hand an axe, while with her left she felt for her intended victim. And then, raising the axe in both her hands, she chopped off the head of her own daughter. As soon as she went away, the maiden got up and went to her sweetheart, who was called Roland, and knocked at his door. When he came out, she said to him, "Dearest Roland, we must flee at once. My stepmother would have killed me, but in the dark she has murdered her own child. If day comes and she discovers what she has done, we are lost."
"But I advise you," said Roland, "first to take away her magic wand, or we cannot save ourselves if she should follow and catch us."
So the maiden stole away the wand, and taking up the head, dropped 3 drops of blood upon the ground, 1 before the bed, 1 in the kitchen, and 1 upon the step. This done, she hurried away with her lover. When the morning came, and the old witch had dressed herself, she called to her daughter, and would have given her the apron, but no one came.
"Where are you?" she called. "Here upon the step,"
answered one of the drops of blood. The old woman went out, but, seeing nobody on the step, she called a second time.
"Where are you?" "Hi, here in the kitchen. I am warming myself,"
replied the second drop of blood. She went into the kitchen, but could see nobody, and once again she cried,
"Where are you?"
"Ah, here I sleep in the bed," said the third drop, and she entered the room. But what a sight met her eyes! There lay her own child, covered with blood, for she herself had cut off her head. The old witch flew into a terrible passion, sprang out of the window, and looking far and near, presently spied out her stepdaughter, who was hurrying away with Roland.
"That won't help you," she shouted. "Were you twice as far, you should not escape me."
So saying, she drew on her boots, on which she went an hour's walk with every stride, and before long she overtook the fugitives. But the maiden, as soon as she saw the witch in sight, changed her dear Roland into a lake with the magic wand, and herself into a duck who could swim upon its surface. When the old witch arrived at the shore, she threw in breadcrumbs and tried all sorts of means to entice the duck. But it was all of no use, and she was obliged to go away at evening without accomplishing her ends. When she was gone, the maiden took her natural form, and Roland also, and all night long till daybreak they travelled onwards. Then the maiden changed herself into a rose, which grew amid a very thorny hedge, and Roland became a fiddler. Soon after up came the old witch, and said to him,
"Good player, may I break off your flower?"
"Oh, yes," he replied, "and I will accompany you with a tune."
In great haste she climbed at the bank to reach the flower, and as soon as she was in the hedge he began to play, and whether she liked it or not, she was obliged to dance to the music, for it was a bewitched tune.
The quicker he played, the higher she was obliged to jump, till the thorns tore all the clothes off her body and scratched and wounded her so much that at last she fell down dead. Then Roland, when he saw they were saved, said, "Now I will go to my father and arrange the wedding."
"Yes," said the maiden, "and meanwhile I will rest here and wait for your return. And, that no one may know me, I will change myself into a red stone."
Roland went away and left her there, but when he reached home, he fell into the snares laid for him by another maiden, and forgot his true love, who for a long time waited his coming. But at last, in sorrow and despair forever of seeing him again, she changed herself into a beautiful flower, and thought that perhaps someone might pluck her and carry her to his home. A day or two after, a shepherd, who was tending his flock in the field, chanced to see the enchanted flower, and because it was so very beautiful, he broke it off, took it with him, and laid it by in his chest. From that day everything prospered in the shepherd's house, and marvelous things happened. When he arose in the morning, he found all the work already done. The room was swept, the chairs and tables dusted, the fire lighted upon the hearth, and the water fetched. When he came home at noonday, the table was laid, and a good meal prepared for him. He could not imagine how it was all done, for he could find nobody ever in his house when he returned, and there was no place for anyone to conceal himself. The good arrangements certainly pleased him well enough, but he became so anxious at last to know who it was, that he went and asked the advice of a wise woman. The woman said, "There is some witchery in the business. Listen one morning if you can hear anything moving in the room, and if you do and can see anything, be it what it will, throw a white napkin over it, and the charm will be dispelled." The shepherd did as he was bid, and the next morning, just as day broke, he saw his chest open and the flower come out of it. He instantly sprang up and threw a white napkin over it, and immediately the spell was broken, and a beautiful maiden stood before him, who acknowledged that she was the handmaid who, as a flower, had put his house in order. She told him her tale, and she pleased the shepherd so much that he asked her if she would marry him, but she said no, for she would still keep true to her dear Roland. Although he had left her, nevertheless, she promised still to remain with the shepherd and see after his cottage. Meanwhile, the time had arrived for the celebration of Roland's wedding, and according to the old custom, it was proclaimed through all the country round that every maiden might assemble to sing in honor of the bridal pair. When the poor girl heard this, she was so grieved that it seemed as if her heart would break, and she would not have gone to the wedding if others had not come and taken her with them. When it came to her turn to sing, she stepped back till she was quite by herself, and as soon as she began, Roland jumped up, exclaiming, "I know that voice! That is the true bride! No other will I have!" At that he had hitherto forgotten and neglected to think of all of was suddenly brought back to his heart's remembrance, and he would not again let her go. And now the wedding of the faithful maiden to the dear Roland was celebrated with great magnificence, and, their sorrows and troubles being over, happiness became their lot.
Thus ends the story of Roland. This next story is entitled The Juniper Tree. One moment while I take a quick drink. Have to stay hydrated and liquidic while speaking. The Juniper Tree by the Brothers Grimm. It is now long ago, perhaps 2,000 years, there was a rich man who had a beautiful and pious wife, and they were very fond of one another, but had no children. Still they wished for some very much, and the wife prayed for them day and night till they had none, but still they had none. Before their house was a yard. In it stood a juniper tree, under which the woman stood once in the winter peeling an apple, and as she peeled the apple she cut her finger, and the blood dropped on the snow. "Ah," said the woman with a deep sigh, as she looked at the blood before her, and was very sad. "Had I but a child as red as blood, and as white as snow." And as she said that, she felt quite lively, and it seemed quite as if something would come of it. Then she went into the house, and a month passed. The snow disappeared, and 2 months, then all was green, and 3 months, then came the flowers out of the ground, and 4 months, then all the trees in the wood squeezed up against one another, and the green boughs all grew twisted together, and the little birds sang, so that the whole wood resounded, and the blossoms fell from the trees. Then the 5th month had gone, and she stood under the juniper tree. It smelt so sweet. Then her heart leaped for joy, and she couldn't help falling down on her knees. And when the 6th month had passed, the fruits were large, and she was quite pleased. And the 7th month, then she snatched the berries and ate them so greedily that she was dreadfully ill. Then went the 8th month, and she called her husband and cried, and said, "If I die, bury me under the juniper tree." Then she was quite easy, and was glad, till the next month was gone. Then she had a child as white as snow, and as red as blood, and when she saw it, she was so delighted that she died. Then her husband buried her under the juniper tree, and began to cry most violently. A little time, and he was easier, and when he had cried a bit more, he left off, and a little time longer, and he took another wife. With the 2nd wife he had a daughter, but the child by the 1st wife was a little son, and was as red as blood, and as white as snow. When the woman looked at her daughter, she loved her so much, but then she looked at the little boy, and it seemed to go right through her heart, and it seemed as if he always stood in her way. And then she was always thinking how she could get all the fortune for her daughter, and it was the evil one who suggested it to her, so that she couldn't bear the sight of the little boy, and poked him about from one corner to another, and buffeted him here and cuffed him there, so that the poor child was always in fear. and when he came from school, he had no peace. Once the woman had gone into the storeroom, and the little daughter came up and said,
"Mother, give me an apple."
"Yes, my child," said the woman, and gave her a beautiful apple out of the box. The box had a great heavy lid with a great sharp iron lock.
"Mother,"
said the little daughter,
"shall not brother have one too?"
That annoyed the woman, but she said, "Yes, when he comes from school." And as she saw out of the window that he was coming, it was just as if the evil one came over her, and she snatched the apple away from her daughter again and said, "You shall not have one before your brother." She threw the apple into the box and shut it. Then the little boy came in the door, and the evil one made her say in a friendly manner, "My son, will you have an apple?" And she looked at him wickedly.
"Mother,"
said the little boy,
"how horribly you look. Yes, give me an apple."
Then she thought she must pacify him.
"Come with me,"
she said, and opened the lid.
"Reach out an apple."
And the little boy bent into the box. The evil one whispered to her. Bang! She slammed the lid to, so that his head flew off and fell amongst the red apples. Then, in her fright, she thought, "Could I get that off my mind?" Then she went up to her room, to the chest of drawers, and got out a white cloth from the top drawer, and she set the head on the throat again, and tied the handkerchief round so that nothing could be seen, and placed him outside the door on a chair, and gave him the apple in his hand. After a while, little Marlene came into the kitchen to her mother, who stood by the fire, and had a kettle with hot water before her, which she kept stirring round.
"Mother,"
said little Marlene,
"brother is sitting outside the door, and looks quite white, and has got an apple in his hand. I asked him to give me the apple, but he didn't answer me. Then I was quite frightened."
"Go again," said the mother, "and if he will not answer you, give him a box in the ear." Then Marlene went to the brother and said,
"Give me the apple."
But he was silent. Then she gave him a box on the ear, and the head tumbled off, at which she was frightened and began to cry and sob. Then she ran to the mother and said,
"Oh, mother, I have knocked my brother's head off."
And she cried and would not be pacified.
"Marlene," said the mother, "what have you done? But be quiet, so that nobody may notice it. It can't be helped now. We'll bury him under the juniper tree."
Then the mother took the little boy and put him into a box, and put it under the almond tree. But little Marlene stood by and cried, and the tears all fell into the box. Soon the father came home, and sat down to table, and said, "Where is my son?" Then the mother brought in a great big dish of stew, and little Marlene cried, and could not leave off. Then the father said again, "Where is my son?"
"Oh,"
said the mother,
"he had gone across the country to Mutton. He is going to stop there a bit."
"What is he doing there? And why did he not say goodbye to me?"
"Oh, he wanted to go, and asked me if he might stop there 6 weeks. He will be taken care of there."
"Ah," said the man, "I feel very dull. That was not right. He ought to have wished me goodbye."
With that he began to eat, and said to Marlene,
"What are you crying for?" Your brother will soon come back. Oh, wife, said he then, how delicious this tastes. Give me some more. And he ate till all the broth was done.
Little Marlene went to her box and took from the bottom drawer her best silk handkerchief and carried it outside the door and cried bitter tears. Then she laid herself under the juniper tree on the green grass, and when she had laid herself there, all at once she felt quite light and happy, and cried no more. Then the juniper tree began to move, and the boughs spread out quite wide, and then went back again, just as when one is very much pleased, and claps with the hands. At the same time, a sort of mist rose from the tree. In the middle of the mist, it burned like a fire, and out of the fire there flew a beautiful bird that sang very sweetly and flew high up in the air. And when it had flown away, the juniper tree was as it had been before. Then little Marlene was as light and happy as if her brother were alive still, and went into the house to dinner. The bird flew away and perched upon a goldsmith's house and began to sing. My mother killed me, my father grieved for me, my sister little Marlene wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I. The goldsmith sat in his workshop and was making a gold chain when he heard the bird that sat upon the roof and sang, and it seemed to him so beautiful that he got up, and as he stepped over the sill of the door, he lost one of his slippers, but he went straight up the middle of the street with one slipper and one sock on. He had his leather apron on, and in the one hand he had the gold chain, and in the other the pincers, and the sun shone brightly up the street. He went and stood and looked at the bird. Bird, said he then, how beautifully you can sing. Sing me that song again. Nay, said the bird, I don't sing twice for nothing. Give me the gold chain, and I will sing it to you again. There, said the goldsmith, take the gold chain. Now sing me that again. The bird came and took the gold chain in the right claw, and sat before the goldsmith and sang. My mother killed me, my father grieved for me, my sister little Marlene wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I. Then the bird flew off to a shoemaker and perched upon the roof of his house and sang. My mother killed me, my father grieved for me, my sister little Marlene wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I. The shoemaker heard it and ran outside the door in his shirt sleeves and looked up at the roof and was obliged to hold his hand before his eyes to prevent the sun from blinding him. Bird, said he, how beautifully you can sing. Then he called in at the door, Wife, come out, here's a bird, look at the bird. He just can sing beautifully. Then he called his daughter and children and apprentices, servant boy and maid, and they all came up the street and looked at the bird. Oh, how beautiful he was! And he had such red and green feathers, and round about the throat was all like gold, and the eyes sparkled in his head like stars. Bird, said the shoemaker, now sing me that piece again. Nay, said the bird, I don't sing twice for nothing. You must make me a present of something. Wife, said the man, go into the shop. On the top shelf there stands a pair of red shoes. Fetch them down. The wife went and fetched the shoes.
"There, bird," said the man. "Now sing me that song again."
Then the bird came and took the shoes in the left claw and flew up to the roof again and sang.
My mother killed me, my father grieved for me, my sister, little Marlene, wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I.
And when he had done singing, he flew away. The chain he had in the right claw, and the shoes in the left claw, and he flew far away to a mill, and the mill went clip, clap, clip, clap, clip, clap. And in the mill there sat 20 miller's men. They were shaping a stone, and chipped away, hick, hack, hick, hack, hick, hack. And the mill went clip, clap, clip, clap, clip, clap. Then the bird flew and sat on a lime tree that had stood before the mill, and sang.
My mother killed me.
Then one left off.
My father grieved for me.
Then 2 more left off and heard it.
My sister.
Then again 4 left off.
Little Marlene.
Now there were only 8 chipping away.
Wept under.
Now only 5.
The juniper tree.
Now only 1.
Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I.
Then the last left off when he heard the last word.
"Bird," said he, "how beautifully you sing. Let me too hear that. Sing me that again."
Nay, said the bird, I don't sing twice for nothing. Give me the millstone, and I will sing it again.
"Aye," said he, "if it belonged to me alone, you should have it." "Yes," said the others, "if he sings again, he shall have it."
Then the bird came down, and all the 20 millers caught hold of a pole and raised the stone up.
Huh, huh, up, huh, up, huh, up.
And the bird stuck his head through the hole and took it round his neck like a collar, and flew back to the tree and sang.
My mother killed me, my father grieved for me, my sister, little Marlene, wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I.
And when he had done singing, he spread his wings, and had in his right claw the gold chain, in his left the shoes, and round his neck the millstone, and he flew far away to his father's house. In the room sat his father, the mother, and little Marlene at dinner, and the father said,
"Oh dear, how light and happy I feel."
Nay, said the mother, I am all of tremble, just as if there were going to be a heavy thunderstorm.
But little Marlene sat and cried and cried, and the bird came flying, and as he perched on the roof, the father said,
"I feel so lively, and the sun shines so deliciously outside. It's exactly as if I were going to see some old acquaintance again."
Nay, said the wife, I am so frightened my teeth chatter, and it's like fire in my veins.
And she tore open her stays, but little Marlene sat in a corner and cried, and held her plate before her eyes, and cried it quite wet. Then the bird perched on the juniper tree and sang.
My mother killed me.
Then the mother held her ears and shut her eyes, and would neither see nor hear, but it rumbled in her ears like the most terrible storm, and her eyes burned and twittered like lightning.
My father grieved for me.
"Oh, mother," said the man, "is there a beautiful bird that sings so splendidly? The sun shines so warm, and everything smells all like cinnamon."
My sister, little Marlene.
Then Marlene laid her head on her knees and cried away. But the man said,
I shall go out. I must see the bird close.
"Oh, do not go,"
said the woman.
"It seems as if the whole house shook and were on fire."
But the man went out and looked at the bird.
"Wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I."
And the bird let the gold chain fall, and it fell just round the man's neck, and fitted beautifully. Then he went in and said,
See what an excellent bird it is. It has given me such a beautiful gold chain, and it looks so splendid.
But the woman was so frightened that she fell her whole length on the floor, and her cap tumbled off her head. Then the bird sang again.
"My mother killed me. Oh, that I were 1,000 fathoms under the earth not to hear that. My father grieved for me."
Then the woman fainted.
"My sister, little Marlene." "Ah,"
said Marlene.
"I will go out too, and see if the bird will give me something."
Then she went out. Then the bird threw the shoes down.
"Wept under the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I."
Then she was so happy and lively, she put on new red shoes on, and danced and jumped back again.
"Oh," said she, "I was so dull when I went out, and now I'm so happy. This is a splendid bird. He has given me a pair of red shoes."
"Well," said the woman, and jumped up, and her hair stood on end like flames of fire.
"I feel as if the world were coming to an end. I will go out too, and see if it will make me easier."
And as she stepped outside the door, bang! The bird dropped the millstone on her head and crushed her to death. The father and little Marlene heard it and went out. Then a smoke and flames and fire rose from the place, and when that had passed, there stood the little brother, and he took his father and little Marlene by the hand, and all three were happy and lively, and went into the house to dinner. Thus ends The Juniper Tree. This next story is entitled The Little Farmer. So, beware of singing birds carrying millstones around their neck, or they'll get you. So, let us begin with The Little Farmer. There was a certain village wherein several rich farmers were settled, and only one poor one, who was therefore called the Little Farmer. He had not even a cow, nor money to buy it, though he and his wife would have been too happy to have one. One day he said to her, "A good thought has just struck me. Our father-in-law, the carver, can make us a calf out of wood and paint it brown, so that it will look like any other. In time, perhaps, it will grow big and become a cow." This proposal pleased his wife, and the carver was instructed accordingly, and he cut out the calf, painted it as it should be, and so made it that its head was bent down as if eating. Any bird that sings in English with a giant rock is automatically fey. Yeah. Yep. Enchanted birds. When the next morning the cows were driven out to pasture, the farmer called the shepherd in and said, "See, I have here a little calf, but it is so small that it must as yet be carried." The shepherd said, "Very well," and taking it under his arm, carried it down to the meadow and set it among the grass. All day the calf stood there as if eating, and the shepherd said, "It will soon grow big and go alone. Only see how it is eating." At evening time, when he wanted to drive his flocks home, he said to the calf, "Since you can stand there to satisfy your hunger, you must also be able to walk upon your 4 legs, and I shall not carry you home in my arms." The little farmer stood before his house door waiting for his calf, and as the shepherd drove his herd through the village, he asked after it. The shepherd replied, "It is still standing there eating. It would not listen and come with me." The farmer exclaimed, What? I must have my calf!" And so they both went together down to the meadow, but someone had stolen the calf, and it was gone. The shepherd said, "Perhaps it has run away itself." But the farmer replied, "Not so, that won't do for me." And dragging him before the mayor, he was condemned for his negligence to give the little farmer a cow in the place of the lost calf. Now the farmer and his wife possessed the long-desired cow and were very glad, but having no fodder, they could not give her nothing to eat, so that very soon they were obliged to kill her. The flesh they salted down, and the skin the little farmer took to the next town to sell, to buy another calf, with what he got for it. On the way he passed a mill, where a raven was sitting with a broken wing, and out of compassion he took up the bird and wrapped it in the skin he was carrying. But the weather being just then very bad, a great storm of wind and rain falling, he was unable to go further, and turning into the mill, begged for shelter. The miller's wife was at home alone, and said to the farmer, "Lie down on that straw," and gave him a piece of bread and cheese. The farmer ate it and lay down, with his skin near him, and the miller's wife thought he was asleep. Presently in came the parson, whom she received well and invited to sup with her. But the farmer, when he heard talk of the feast, was vexed that he should have been treated only to bread and cheese. So the woman went down to the cellar and brought up 4 dishes, roast meat, salad, boiled meat, and wine. And as they were sitting down to eat, there was a knock outside, and the woman exclaimed, "Oh, gracious, there is my husband!" In a great hurry, she stuck the roast meat into the oven, the wine under the pillow, the salad upon the bed, and the boiled meat under it. And the parson stepped into a closet where she kept the linen. This done, she let in her husband and said, "God be praised, you are returned again. What weather it is, as if the world were coming to an end." The miller remarked the man lying on the straw, and asked what the fellow did there. His wife said, "Ah, the poor fellow came in the wind and rain and begged for shelter, so I gave him some bread and cheese, and showed him the straw." The husband said he had no objection, but bade her bring him quickly something to eat. The wife said, "I have nothing but bread and cheese." And her husband told her with that he should be contented, and asked the farmer to come and share his meal. The farmer did not let himself be twice asked, but got up and ate away. Presently the miller remarked the skin lying upon the ground, in which was the raven.
and asked, "What have you there?" The farmer replied, "I have a truth-teller therein." "Can it tell me the truth too?" inquired the miller. "Why not?" said the other. "But he will only say 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself." The miller was curious and wished to hear it speak. The farmer squeezed the raven's head so that it squeaked out. The miller then asked, "What did he say?" And the farmer replied, "The first is, under the pillow lies wine." "That is a rare telltale," cried the miller, and went and found the wine. "Now again," said he. The farmer made the raven croak again, and said, "Secondly, he declares there is roast meat in the oven." "That is a good telltale," again cried the miller, and, opening the oven, he took out the roast meat. Then the farmer made the raven croak again, and said, "For the 3rd thing, he declares there is salad on the bed." "That is a good telltale," cried the miller, and went and found the salad. Then the farmer made his bird croak once more, and said, "For the 4th thing, he declares there is boiled meat under the bed." "That is a capital telltale," cried the miller, where he went and found as it said. The worthy pair now sat down together at the table, but the miller's wife felt terribly anxious and went to bed, taking all the keys with her. The miller was very anxious to know the 5th thing, but the man said, "First let us eat quietly these 4 things, and the other is somewhat dreadful." After they had finished their meal, the miller bargained as to how much he should give for the 5th thing, and at last he agreed for $300. Then the farmer once more made the raven croak, and when the miller asked what it said, he told him, "He declares that in the cupboard where the linen is, there is an evil spirit." And the miller said, "The evil spirit must walk out," and tried the door, but it was locked, and the woman had to give up the key to the farmer, who unlocked it. The parson at once bolted out and ran out of the house, while the miller said, "Ah, I saw the black fellow. That was all right." Soon they went to sleep, but at daybreak the farmer took his $300 and made himself scarce. The farmer was now quite rich at home, and built himself a fine house, so that his fellows said, "The little farmer has certainly found the golden snow, of which he has brought away a basketful." And they summoned him before the mayor, that he might be made to say whence his riches came. The man replied, "I have sold my cow's skin in the city for $300. And as soon as the others heard this, they desired also to make a similar profit. The farmers ran home, killed their cows, and taking the skins off, took them to the city to sell them for as good a price. The mayor, however, said, "My maid must go first." And when she arrived at the city, she went to the merchant, but he gave her only $3 for her skin. And when the rest came, he would not give them so much, saying, "What shall I do with all these skins?" The farmers were much vexed at being outwitted by their poor neighbor, and, bent on revenge, they complained to the mayor of his deceit. The innocent little farmer was condemned to death unanimously, and was to be rolled in a cask full of holes into the sea. He was led away, and a priest sent for who should say for him the mass for the dead. Everyone else was obliged to remove to a distance, and when the farmer looked at the priest, he recognized the parson who was with the miller's wife. So he said to him, I have delivered you out of the cupboard. Now deliver me from this cask. Just at that moment, the shepherd passed by with a flock of sheep, and the farmer, knowing that for a long time the man had desired to be mayor, cried out with all his might, "No, no, I will not do it! If all the world asks me, I will not be it! No, I will not!" When the shepherd heard this, he came up and said, "What are you doing here? What will you not do?" The farmer replied, "They will make me mayor if I keep in this cask, but no, I will not be here." "Oh," said the shepherd, "if nothing more is wanting to be mayor, I am willing to put myself in the cask." "Yes, you will be mayor if you do that," said the farmer, and getting out of the cask, the other got in, and the farmer nailed the lid down again. Now he took the shepherd's flock and drove it away, while the parson went to the judge and told him he had said the prayers for the dead. Then they went and rolled the cask down to the water, and while it rolled, the shepherd called out, "Yes, I should like to be mayor." They thought it was the little farmer who spoke, and saying, "Yes, we mean it, only you must first go below there." And they sent the cask right into the sea. That done, the farmers returned home, and as they came into the village, so came also the little farmer, driving a flock of sheep quietly and cheerfully. The sight astounded the others, and they asked, "Whence comest thou? Dost thou come out of the water?" "Certainly," answered he. "I sank deeper and deeper till I got to the bottom, where I pushed up the head of the cask. And, getting out, there were beautiful meadows upon which many lambs were pasturing, and I brought this flock of them up with me." "Are there any more?" inquired the farmers. "Oh, yes," replied he, "more than you know what to do with." Then the farmers agreed that they would go and each fetch up a flock for himself. But the mayor said, "I must go first." So they went together down to the water, and there happened to be a fine blue sky with plenty of fleecy clouds over it, which were mirrored in the water and looked like little lambs. The farmers called to one another, "Look there, we can see the sheep already on the ground below the water." And the mayor, pressing quite forward, said, "I will go first and look about me, and see if it is a good place, then call to you." So saying, he jumped in plump, and as he splashed the water about, the others thought he was calling, "Come along!" And so, one after another, the whole assemblage plunged in a grand hurry. Thus the whole village cleared out, and the little farmer was the only heir, became a very rich man. Thus ends The Little Farmer. That was certainly interesting. So I hope you all enjoyed that. A bunch of trickery. This next story is entitled Jorind and Joringel. While I change the title. Yeah, these are names I have never heard before. But let us begin.
Jorinde and Joringel by the brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, in a castle in the midst of a large, thick wood, there lived an old witch all by herself. By day, she changed herself into a cat or an owl, but in the evening she resumed her right form. She was able to allure to her the wild animals and birds, whom she killed, cooked, and ate. For whoever ventured within 100 steps of her castle was obliged to stand still, and could not stir from the spot until she allowed it. But if a pretty maiden came into the circle, the witch changed her into a bird, and then put her into a basket, which she carried into one of the rooms in the castle. And in this room were already many thousand such baskets of rare birds. Now there was a young maiden called Jorinde, who was exceedingly pretty, and she was betrothed to a youth named Joringel. And just at that time that the events which I am about to relate happened, they were passing the days together in a round pleasure. One day they went into the forest for a walk, and Joringel said, "Take care that you do not go too near the castle." It was a beautiful evening. The sun was shining between the stems of the trees and brightening up the dark green leaves, and the turtle doves cooing softly upon the may bushes. Jorinde began to cry, and sat down in the sunshine with Joringel. Cried too, for they were quite frightened, and thought they should die. When they looked round, they saw how far they had wandered, and that there was no house in sight. The sun was yet half above the hills and half below, and Joringel, looking through the bush-wood, saw the old walls of the castle close by them, which frightened him terribly, so that he fell off his seat. Then Jorinde sang,
"My little bird, with his ring so red, sings sorrow and woe. For he sings the turtle dove soon will be dead. Oh, sorrow and sorrow, jug, jug, jug."
That is supposed to be a representation of the notes of bird song, apparently. Joringel lifted up his head and saw Jorinde was changed into a nightingale, which was singing, "Chug, chug, chug." And presently an owl flew round thrice, with his eyes glistening and crying, "Whit, woo!" Joringel could not stir. There he stood like a stone, and could not weep, nor speak, nor move hand or foot. Meanwhile the sun set, and the owl, flying into a bush, came out an ugly old woman, thin and yellow, with great red eyes, and a crooked nose, which reached down to her chin. She muttered and seized the nightingale and carried it away in her hand, while Joringel remained there incapable of moving or speaking. At last the witch returned and said with a hollow voice, "Greet you, Zachiel. If the moon shines on your side, release this one at once." Then Joringel became free and fell down on his knees before the witch and begged her to give him back Jorinde. But she refused and said he should never again have her, and went away. He cried and wept and groaned after her, but all to no purpose, and at length he rose and went into a strange village, where for some time he tended sheep. He often went round about the enchanted castle, but never too near, and one night, after so walking, he dreamt that he found a blood-red flower, in the middle of which lay a fine pearl. This flower, he thought, he broke off, and, going therewith to the castle, all he touched with it was free from enchantment, and thus he regained his Jorinde. When he awoke the next morning, he began his search over hill and valley to find such a flower. 9 days had passed away. At length, early one morning, he discovered it, and in its middle was a large dewdrop, like a beautiful pearl. Then he carried the flower day and night, till he came to the castle, and although he ventured within the enchanted circle, he was not stopped, but walked on quite to the door. Joringel was now in high spirits, and touching the door with his flower, it flew open. He entered and passed through the hall, listening for the sound of the birds, which at last he heard. He found the room and went in. There was the enchantress feeding the birds in the 7,000 baskets. As soon as she saw Joringel, she became frightfully enraged and spat out poison and gall at him. But she dared not come too close. He would not turn back for her, but looked at the baskets of birds. But alas, there were many hundreds of nightingales, and how was he to know his Jorinde? While he was examining them, he perceived the old woman secretly taking away one of the baskets and slipping out of the door. Joringel flew after her and touched the basket with his flower, and also the old woman, so that she could no longer bewitch. And at once Jorinde stood before him and fell upon his neck, as beautiful as she ever was. Afterwards, he disenchanted all the other birds, and then returned home with his Jorinde, and for many years they lived together happily and contentedly. Thus ends Tale of Jorinde and Joringel. So the witch is still alive. She just can't bewitch anyone anymore, which is interesting. This next tale is entitled Vier Apple. So let us begin. Vier Apple by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, as a forester was going into the wood, he heard a cry like that of a child, and, walking in the direction of the sound, he came to a fir tree on which sat a little boy. A mother had gone to sleep under the tree with her child in her lap, and while she slept, a golden eagle had seized it and borne it away to the topmost bough in his beak. So the forester mounted and fetched the child down, and took it home to be brought up with his daughter Helen, and the two grew up together. The boy whom he had rescued he named Fir Apple, in remembrance of his adventure, and Helen and the boy loved each other so fondly that they were quite unhappy whenever they were separated. This forester had also an old cook, who one evening took 2 pails and went to fetch water, but she did not go once only, but many times to the spring. Little Helen, seeing her, asked, "Why do you carry so much water, old Sarah?" "If you promise not to tell anyone, I will let you know," replied the cook. Little Helen promised not to tell, and the cook said,
Early in the morning, when the forester is away to the chase, I shall heat the water, and when it boils, I shall throw in fir apple and stew him.
The next day the forester arose with the sun and went out, while the children were still in bed. Then Helen said to Fir Apple,
Forsake me not, and so I will never leave you.
And he replied,
Now and forever I will stay with you. Do you know, continued Helen, yesterday the old cook fetched ever so many pails of water, and I asked her why she did so, and she said to me, If you do not say anything, I will tell you. And as I promised not to tell, she said, Early this morning, when father had gone out, she should boil the copper full of water and stew you in it. But let us get up very quickly and escape while there is time.
So saying, they both arose, and dressing themselves very hastily, ran away as quickly as they could. When the water had become boiling hot, the old cook went into the sleeping room to fetch Fir Apple. But lo, as soon as she entered and stepped up to the beds, she perceived that both the children were off, and at the sight she grew very anxious, saying to herself,
What shall I say if the forester comes home and finds the children gone? I must send after them and fetch them back.
Thus thinking, she sent after them 3 slaves, bidding them overtake the children as quickly as possible and bring them home. But the children saw the slaves running towards them, and little Helen said,
Forsake me not, and so I will never leave you. Now and always I will keep by you,
replied Fir Apple.
Do you then become a rose stalk, and I will be the bud upon it, said Helen.
So, when the slaves came up, the children were nowhere to be found, and only a rose tree, with a single bud thereon to be seen. And the 3 agreed there was nothing to do, and went home and told the old cook they had seen nothing at all in the world but a rose tree with a single flower upon it. At their tale the old cook began to scold terribly, and said,
You stupid simpletons! You should have cut the rose bush in 2, and broken off the flower and brought it home to me. Make haste now, and do so. For the second
time they had to go out and search. And the children, seeing them at a distance, little Helen asked her companion the same question as the first time. And when he gave the same reply, she said,
Do you then become a church, and I will be the crown therein?
When now the 3 slaves approached, they found nothing but a church and a crown inside. And so they said to one another, What can we do here? Let us go home. As soon as they reached the house, the cook inquired what they had found. And when they had told their tale, she was very angry, and told them they ought to have pulled down the church and brought the crown home with them. When she had finished scolding, she set out herself, walking with the 3 slaves after the children, who espied her coming from a distance. This time little Helen proposed that she should become a pond, and Fir Apple a duck, who should swim about on it. And so they changed into these immediately. When the old woman came up and saw the pond, she lay down by it and began to drink it up. But the duck swam very quickly toward her, and without her knowledge, stuck his beak into her cap and drew her into the water, where, after vainly endeavoring to save herself, she sank to the bottom. After this, the children returned home together and were very happy, and, if they are not dead,
I suppose they are still alive and merry. Thus ends our apple. Quick drink. Cannibalism, for some reason. Apparently, Germans are like, yeah, what? Evil people do cannibalism. That's what happens. This next tale is entitled Catherine and Frederick. Ending with a K. Friedrich. So let us begin. Catherine and Frederick by the brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a youth named Frederick and a girl named Catherine who had married and lived together as a young couple. One day, Fred said, "I am now going into the fields, dear Catherine, and by the time I return, let there be something hot upon the table, for I shall be hungry, and something to drink too, for I shall be thirsty."
"Very well, dear Fred," said she. "Go at once, and I will make all right for you."
As soon, then, as dinner time approached, she took down a sausage out of the chimney, and putting it on in a frying pan with batter, set it over the fire. Soon the sausage began to fizzle and spit, while Catherine stood by holding the handle of the pan and thinking, and among other things, she thought that while the sausage was getting ready, she might go into the cellar and draw some beer. So she took a can and went down into the cellar to draw the beer, and while it ran in, she bethought herself that perhaps the dog might steal the sausage out of the pan. And so up the cellar stairs she ran, but too late, for the rogue had already got the meat in his mouth and was sneaking off. Catherine, however, pursued the dog for a long way over the fields, but the beast was quicker than she, and would not let the sausage go, but bolted off at a great rate. "Off is off," said Catherine, and turned round, and, being very tired and hot, she went home slowly to cool herself. All this while the beer was running out of the cask, for Catherine had forgotten to turn the tap off. And so, as soon as the can was full, the liquor ran over the floor of the cellar until it was all out. Catherine saw the misfortune at the top of the steps. "My gracious," she exclaimed, "what shall I do that Fred may not find this out?" She considered for some time, till she remembered that a sack of fine malt yet remained from the last brewing in one corner, which she would fetch down and strew about in the beer. "Yes," said she, "it was spared at the right time to be useful to me now in my necessity." And down she pulled the sack so hastily that she overturned the can of beer for Fred, and away it mixed with the rest on the floor. "It is all right," said she. "Where one is, the other should be." And she strewed the malt over the whole cellar. When it was done, she was quite overjoyed at her work, and said, "How clean and neat it does look, to be sure." A sausage from the fireplace. Yes, they used to put meats up, basically kind of up the chimney a little bit, so that way they would be smoked. At noontime, Fred returned.
"Now, wife, what have you ready for me?" said he.
"Ah, my dear Fred," she replied, "I would have fried you a sausage, but while I drew the beer, the dog stole it out of the pan. And while I hunted the dog, the beer all ran out. And as I was about to dry up the beer with the malt, I overturned your can. But be contented, the cellar is quite dry again now."
"Oh, Catherine, Catherine," said Fred, "you should not have done so. To let the sausage be stolen, and the beer ran out, and over all to shoot our best sack of malt."
"Well, Fred," said she, "I did not know that. You should have told me."
The husband thought to himself, if one's wife acts so, one must look after things oneself. Now he had collected a tolerable sum of silver dollars, which he changed into gold, and then he told his wife, "Do you see? These are yellow counters, which I will put in a pot and bury in the stable under the cow's stall. But mind that you do not meddle with it, or you will come to some harm." Catherine promised to mind what he said, but as soon as Fred was gone, some hawkers came to the village with earthenware for sale, and amongst others they asked her if she would purchase anything.
"Ah, good people," said Catherine, "I have no money and cannot buy anything. But if you can make use of yellow counters, I will buy them."
"Yellow counters? Ah, why not? Let us look at them," said they.
"Go into the stable," she replied, "and dig under the cow's stall, and there you will find the yellow counters. I dare not go myself."
The rogues went at once, and soon dug up the shining gold, which they very quickly pocketed, and then they ran off, leaving behind them their pots and dishes in the house. Catherine thought she might as well make use of the new pottery, and, since she had no need of anything in the kitchen, she set out each pot on the ground, and then put others on top of the palings round the house for ornament. When Fred returned and saw the fresh decorations, he asked Catherine what she had done.
"I have bought them, Fred," said she, "with the yellow counters which lay under the cow's stall. But I did not dig them up myself. The peddlers did that."
"Ah, wife, what have you done?" replied Fred. "They were not yellow counters, but bright gold, which was all the property we possessed. You should not have done so."
"Well, dear Fred," replied his wife, "you should have told me so before. I did not know that."
Catherine stood considering for a while, and presently she began.
"Come, Fred, we will soon get the gold back again. Let us pursue the thieves."
"Well, come along," said Fred. "We will try at all events, but take butter and cheese with you, that we may have something to eat on our journey."
"Yes, Fred,"
said she, and soon made herself ready. But her husband, being a good walker, she lagged behind.
"Ah," said she, "this is my luck, for when we turn back, I shall be a good bit forward."
Presently she came to a hill, on both sides of which there were very deep ruts.
"Oh, see," said she, "how the poor earth is torn, flayed, and wounded. It will never be well again all its life."
And out of compassion she took out her butter and greased the ruts over right and left, so that the wheels might run more easily through them. And, while she stooped in doing this, a cheese rolled out of her pocket down the mountain. Catherine said when she saw it,
"I have already once made the journey up, and I am not coming down after you. Another shall run and fetch you."
So saying, she took another cheese out of her pocket and rolled it down.
But as it did not return, she thought,
Perhaps they are wanting for a companion, and don't like to come alone.
and down she bowled a third cheese. Still all three stayed, and she said,
I cannot think what this means. Perhaps it is that the third cheese has missed his way. I will send a fourth, that he may call him as he goes by.
But this one acted no better than the others, and Catherine became so anxious that she threw down a fifth and a sixth cheese also. And they were at the last. For a long time after this she waited, expecting they would come. But when she found they did not, she cried out,
You are nice fellows to send after a dead man. You stop a fine time. But do you think I shall wait for you? Oh, no, I shall go on. You can follow me. You have younger legs than I.
So saying, Catherine walked on and came up with Fred, who was waiting for her because he needed something to eat.
Now, said he, give me quickly what you brought.
She handed him the dry bread.
Where are the butter and cheese? Cried her husband.
Oh, Fred, dear, she replied, with the butter I have smeared the ruts, and the cheeses will soon come, but one ran away, and I sent the others after it to call it back.
It was silly of you to do so, said Fred, to grease the roads with butter and to roll cheeses down the hill.
If you had but told me so, said Catherine vexatiously.
So they ate the dry bread together, and presently Fred said,
Catherine, did you make things fast at home before you came out?
No, Fred, said she, you did not tell me.
Then go back and lock up the house before we go further. Bring something to eat with you, and I will stop here for you.
Back went Catherine, thinking,
Ah, Fred will like something else to eat. Butter and cheese will not please. I will bring with me a bag of dried apples and a mug of vinegar to drink.
When she had put these together, she bolted the upper half of the door, but the under door she raised up and carried away on her shoulder, thinking that certainly the house was well protected if she took such good care of the door. Catherine walked along now very leisurely, and, for said she to herself,
Fred will have all the longer rest.
And as soon as she reached him, she gave him the door, saying,
There, Fred, now you have the house door. You can take care of the house yourself.
Oh, my goodness, exclaimed the husband. What a clever wife I have. She has bolted the top door, but brought away the bottom part, where anyone can creep through. Now it is too late to go back to the house, but since you brought the door here, you may carry it onwards.
The door I will willingly carry, replied Catherine, but the apples and the vinegar will be too heavy, for I shall hang them on the door, and make that carry them.
Soon after they came into a wood, and looked about for the thieves. But they could not find them, and when it became dark, they climbed up into a tree to pass the night. But scarcely had they done this, when up came the fellows who carry away what should not go with them, and find things before they are lost. They laid themselves down right under the tree upon which Fred and Catherine were, and, making a fire, prepared to share their booty. Then Fred slipped down on the other side and collected stones, with which he climbed the tree again to beat the thieves with. The stones, however, did them no harm, for the fellows called out,
Ah, it will soon be morning, for the wind is shaking down the chestnuts.
All this while Catherine still had the door on her shoulder, and, as it was pressed very heavily, she thought the dried apples were in fault, and said to Fred,
"I must throw down these apples."
"No, Catherine," said he. "Not now. They might discover us."
"Ah, I must, though. They are so heavy."
"Well, then, do it in the hangman's name," cried Fred. As they fell down, the rogues said, "Ah, the birds are pulling off the leaves."
A little while after, Catherine said again,
"Oh, Fred, I must pour out the vinegar. It is so heavy."
"No, no," said he. "It will discover us."
"Ah, but I must, Fred. It is very heavy,"
said Catherine.
"Well, then, do it in the hangman's name," cried Fred.
So she poured out the vinegar, and as it dropped on them, the thieves said,
"Ah, the dew is beginning to fall."
Not many minutes after Catherine found the door was still quite as heavy, and said again to Fred,
"Now I must throw down the door."
"No, Catherine," said he. "That would certainly discover us."
"Ah, Fred, but I must. It presses me so terribly."
"No, Catherine, dear. Do hold it fast," said Fred.
"There, it is gone,"
said she.
"Then let go in the hangman's name," cried Fred.
While it fell crashing through the branches, the rogues below thought the evil one was descending the tree, and ran off, leaving everything behind them. And early in the morning, Fred and his wife descended, and found all their gold under the tree. As soon as they got home again, Fred said,
"Now, Catherine, you must be very industrious and work hard."
"Yes, my dear husband," said she. "I will go into the fields to cut corn."
When she was come into the field, she said to herself,
"Shall I eat before I cut, or sleep first before I cut?"
She determined to eat, and soon became so sleepy over her meal that when she began to cut, she knew not what she was doing, and cut off half her clothes, gown, petticoat, and all. When after a long sleep Catherine awoke, she got up, half stripped, and said to herself,
"Am I myself, or am I not? Ah, I am not myself."
By and by night came on, and Catherine ran into the village, and, knocking at her husband's window, called,
"Fred!"
"What is the matter?" cried he.
"I want to know if Catherine is indoors," said she.
"Yes, yes," answered Fred. "She is certainly within, fast asleep."
"Then I am at home,"
said she, and ran away. Standing outside, Catherine found some thieves wanting to steal, and going up to them, she said,
"I will help you."
At this the thieves were very glad, not doubting but that she knew where to light on what they sought. But Catherine, stepping in front of the houses, called out,
"Good people, what have you there that we can steal?"
At this the thieves said,
"You will do for us with a vengeance."
and they wished they had never come near her. But in order to rid themselves of her, they said,
"Just before the village, the parson has some roots lying in his field. Go and fetch us some."
Catherine went as she was bid, and began to grub for them, and soon made herself very dirty with the earth. Presently a man came by and saw her, and stood still, for he thought it was the evil one who was groveling so among the roots. Away he ran into the village to the parson, and told him the evil one was in his field, rooting up the turnips.
"Ah, heavens!" said the parson. "I have a lame foot, and cannot go out to exercise him." "Then I will carry you a pick-a-back."
said the man, and took him up. Just as they arrived in the field, Catherine got up and drew herself up to her full height. "Oh, it is the evil one!" cried the parson, and both he and the man hurried away, and, behold, the parson ran faster with his lame legs through fear and terror than the countryman could with his sound legs. Thus ends Catherine and Friedrich. Friedrich. Idiot. That was not a very smart woman. This next tale is entitled The Two Brothers. Hopefully this has less of an idiot in it. So let us begin. The Two Brothers by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time there were two brothers, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man was a goldsmith and of an evil disposition, but the poor brother maintained himself by mending brooms, and withal was honest and pious. He had 2 children, twins, as like one another as 2 drops of water, who used to go into their rich uncle's house and receive a meal of the fragments which he left. One day he happened, when the poor man had gone into the wood for twigs, that he saw a bird which was of gold and more beautiful than he had ever before set eyes on. Of gold and more beautiful than he had ever... He picked up a stone and flung it at the bird, and luckily hit it, but so slightly that only a single feather dropped off. This feather he took to his brother, who looked at it and said, "It is of pure gold," and gave him a good sum of money for it. The next day he climbed up a birch tree to lop off a bough or 2, when the same bird flew out of the branches, and, as he looked round, he found a nest which contained an egg, also of gold. This he took home, as before, to his brother, who said it was of pure gold, and gave him what it was worth, but said that he must have the bird itself. For the 3rd time now, the poor brother went into the forest, and saw the golden bird sitting again upon the tree. And taking up a stone, he threw it at it, and, securing it, took it to his brother, who gave him for it a large pile of gold. With this the man thought he might return, and went home light-hearted. But the goldsmith was crafty and bold, knowing very well what sort of bird it was. He called his wife and said to her, "Roast this bird for me, and take care of whatever falls from it, for I have a mind to eat it by myself." Now the bird was not an ordinary one, certainly, for it possessed this wonderful power, that whoever should eat its heart and liver would find henceforth every morning a gold piece under his pillow. The wife made the bird ready, and putting it on a spit, set it down to roast. Now it happened that while it was at the fire, and the woman was gone out of the kitchen on some other necessary work, the 2 children of the poor broom mender ran in and began to turn the spit round the fire for amusement. Presently 2 little tidbits fell down into the pan out of the bird, and one of the boys said,
"Let us eat these 2 little pieces. I am so hungry, and nobody will find it out."
So they quickly dispatched the 2 morsels, and presently the woman came back, and, seeing at once they had eaten something, asked them what it was.
"2 little bits which fell down out of the bird,"
was the reply.
"They were the heart and the liver,"
exclaimed the woman, quite frightened, and, in order that her husband might not miss them and be in a passion, she quickly killed a little chicken, and, taking out its liver and heart, put it inside the golden bird. As soon as it was done enough, she carried it to the goldsmith, who devoured it quite alone, and left nothing at all on the plate. The next morning, however, when he looked under his pillow, expecting to find the gold pieces, there was not the smallest one possible to be seen. One moment. I'm a little thirsty. The 2 children did not know what good luck had fallen upon them, and when they got up the next morning, something fell ringing upon the ground, and as they picked it up, they found it was 2 gold pieces. They took them to their father, who wondered very much, and considered what he should do with them. But as the next morning the same thing happened, and so on every day, he went to his brother and narrated him the whole story. The goldsmith perceived at once what had happened, that the children had eaten the heart and liver of his bird, and in order to revenge himself, and because he was so covetous and hard-hearted, he persuaded the father that his children were in league with the devil, and warned him not to take the gold, but to turn them out of the house, for the evil one had them in his power, and would make them do some mischief. Their father feared the evil one, and, although it cost him a severe pang, he led his children out into the forest, and left them there with a sad heart. Now these 2 children ran about the wood, seeking the road home, but could not find it. So, when they only wandered farther away, at last they met a huntsman, who asked them to whom they belonged.
"We are the children of the poor broom mender,"
they replied, and told him that their father could no longer keep them at home, because a gold piece lay under their pillows every morning.
"Well," replied the huntsman, "that does not seem right, if you are honest and not idle."
And the good man, having no children of his own, took home with him the twins, because they pleased him, and told him he would be their father and bring them up. With him they learnt all kinds of hunting, and the gold pieces which each one found at his uprising they lay aside against a rainy day. When now they became quite young men, the huntsman took them into the forest and said,
"Today you must perform your shooting trial, that I may make you free huntsmen like myself."
So they went with him and waited a long time, but no wild beast approached, and the huntsman, looking up, saw a flock of wild geese flying over in the form of a triangle.
"Shoot one from each corner,"
said he to the twins, and when they had done this, another flock came flying over in the form of a figure of 2, and from these were also bid to shoot one at each corner. When they had likewise performed this deed successfully, their foster father said,
Now I will make you free, for you are capital marksmen."
Thereupon the two brothers went together into the forest, laying plans and consulting with each other. And when at evening time they sat down to their meal, they said to their foster father,
"We shall not touch the least morsel of food till you have granted our request."
He asked them what it was, and they replied,
"We have now learned everything. Let us go into the world and see what we can do there, and let us set out at once."
"You have spoken like brave huntsmen,"
cried the old man, overjoyed.
"What you have asked is just what I wished. You can set out as soon as you like, for you will be prosperous."
Then they ate and drank together once more in great joy and hilarity. When the appointed day arrived, the old huntsman gave to each youth a good rifle and a dog, and let them take from the gold pieces as many as they liked. Then he accompanied them a part of their way, and at leaving gave them a bare knife, saying,
"If you should separate, stick this knife in a tree by the roadside, and then if one returns to the same point, he can tell how his absent brother fares. For the side upon which there is a mark will, if he must die, rust, but as long as he lives, it will be as bright as ever."
The two brothers now journeyed on till they came to a forest, so large that they could not possibly get out of it in one day. So there they passed the night, and ate what they had in their hunters' pockets. The second day they still walked on, but came to no opening, and, having nothing to eat, one said, "We must shoot something, or we will die from hunger." And he loaded his gun and looked round. Just then an old hare came running up, at which he aimed, but it cried out, "Dear huntsman, pray now, let me live, and I will 2 young leverets give." So saying, it ran back into the brushwood and brought out 2 hares, but they played about so prettily and actively that the hunters could not make up their mind to kill them. So they took them with them, and the 2 leverets followed in their footsteps. Presently a fox came up with them, and as they were about to shoot it, it cried out, "Dear hunters, pray now, let me live, and I will 2 young foxes give." These it brought, and the brothers, instead of killing them, put them with the young hares, and all 4 followed. In a little while a wolf came out of the brushwood, whom the hunters also aimed at, but it cried out as the others,
"Dear hunters, pray now, let me live. 2 young ones in return I'll give."
The hunters placed the 2 wolves with the other animals, who still followed them, and soon they met a bear, who also begged for his life, saying,
"Dear hunters, pray now, let me live. 2 young ones in return I'll give."
These 2 bears were added to the others. They made 8, and now who came last? A lion, shaking his mane. The 2 brothers were not frightened, but aimed at him, and he cried,
"Dear hunters, pray now, let me live. 2 young ones in return I'll give."
The lion then fetched his 2 young cubs, and now the huntsman had 2 lions, 2 bears, 2 wolves, 2 foxes, and 2 hares, following and waiting upon them. Meanwhile their hunger had received no satisfaction, and they said to the foxes, "Here, you slinks, get us something to eat, for you are both sly and crafty." The foxes replied,
Not far from here lies a village, where we can procure many fowls, and thither we shall show you the way.
So they went into the village and brought something to eat for themselves and their animals, and then went on further, for the foxes were well acquainted with the country where the hen roosts were, and so they could direct the huntsman well. One moment. For some little way they walked on without finding any situations where they could live together. So they said to one another, "It cannot be otherwise. We must separate." Then the two brothers divided the beast, so that each one had a lion, a bear, a wolf, a fox, and a hare. And then they took leave of each other, promising to love one another till death. And the knife which their foster father gave them they stuck in a tree, so that one side pointed to the east and the other to the west. The younger brother came afterward with his animals to a town which was completely hung with black crape. He went into an inn and inquired if he could lodge his beasts, and the landlord gave him a stable, and in the wall was a hole through which the hare crept and seized upon a cabbage. The fox fetched himself a hen, and when he had eaten it, he stole the cock also. But the lion, the bear, and the wolf, being too big for the hole, could get nothing. The master, therefore, made the host fetch an ox for them, on which they regaled themselves merrily. And so, having seen after his beasts, he asked the landlord why the town was all hung in mourning. The landlord replied, it was because the next day the king's only daughter was to die. "Is she then sick unto death?" inquired the huntsman. "No," replied the other. "She is well enough, but still she must die." "How is that?" asked the huntsman. "Out there before the town," said the landlord, "is a high mountain on which lives a dragon, who must every year have a pure maiden, or you will lay waste all the country. Now all the maidens have been given up, and there is but one left, the king's daughter, who must also be given up, for there is no other escape, and tomorrow morning it is to happen." The huntsman asked, "Why is the dragon not killed?" "Ah," replied the landlord, "many knights have tried, but everyone has lost his life. And the king has promised his own daughter to him who conquers the dragon, and after his death the inheritance of his kingdom." The huntsman said nothing further at the time, but the next morning, taking with him his beasts, climbed the dragon's mountain. A little way up stood a chapel, and upon an altar therein were 3 cups, and by them was written, "Whoever drinks the contents of these cups will be the strongest man on earth, and may take the sword which lies buried beneath the threshold." Without drinking, the huntsman sought and found the sword in the ground, but he could not move it from its place. So he entered and drank out the cups, and then easily pulled out the sword. And it was so strong that he waved it about like a feather. One moment, chat. My chat is being odd. I don't know why. But we will figure it out. There we go. Let's connect back up. And back to the story. When the hour arrived that the maiden should be delivered over to the dragon, the king and his marshal accompanied her with all the court. From a distance they perceived the huntsman upon the mountain, and took him for the dragon waiting for them, and so would not ascend. But at last, because the whole city must otherwise have been sacrificed, the princess was forced to make the dreadful ascent. The king and his courtiers returned home full of grief, but the marshal had to stop and watch it all from a distance. As the king's daughter reached the top of the hill, she found there not the dragon, the young hunter, who comforted her, saying he would save her, and, leading her into the chapel, shut her up therein. In a short time, the seven-headed dragon came roaring up with a tremendous noise, and, as soon as he perceived the hunter, he was amazed, and asked, "What do you do here on my mountain?" The hunter replied that he came to fight him, and the dragon said, breathing out fire as he spoke from his 7 jaws, "Many a knight has already left his life behind him, and you I will soon kill as dead as they." The fire from his throats set the grass in a blaze, and would have suffocated the hunter with the smoke, had not his beasts come running up and stamped it out. Then the dragon made a dart at the hunter, but he swung his sword round so that it whistled in the air, and cut off 3 of the beast's heads. The dragon now became furious, and raised himself in the air, spitting out fire over his enemy, and trying to overthrow him. But the hunter, springing to one side, raised his sword again, and cut off 3 more of his heads. The beast was half killed with this, and sank down, but tried once more to catch the hunter. But he beat him off, and, with his last strength, cut off his tail, and then, being unable to fight longer, he called his beasts, who came and tore the dragon in pieces. As soon as the battle was over, he went to the chapel and unlocked the door, and found the princess lying on the floor, for, from anguish and terror, she had fainted away while the contest was going on. The hunter carried her out, and, when she came to herself and opened her eyes, he showed her the dragon torn in pieces, and said she was now safe forever. The sight made her quite happy, and she said, "Now you will be my husband. My father has promised me to him who should kill the dragon." So saying, she took off her necklace of coral, and divided it among the beasts for a reward, the lion receiving the gold snap for his share, but her handkerchief, on which her name was marked, she presented to the huntsman, who went and cut out the tongues of the dragon's 7 mouths, and, wrapping them in the handkerchief, preserved it carefully. All this being done, the poor fellow felt so weary with the battle with the dragon and the fire that he said to the princess, "Since we are both so tired, let us sleep a while." She consented, and they lay down on the ground, and the hunter bid the lion watch that nobody surprised them. Soon they began to snore, and the lion sat down near them to watch, but he was also weary with fighting, and said to the bear, "Do you lie down near me, for I must sleep a bit, but wake me up if anyone comes." So the bear did as he was bid, but soon getting tired, he asked the wolf to watch for him. The wolf consented. Before long, he called the fox and said, "Do watch for me a while. I want to have a nap, and you can wake me if anyone comes." The fox lay down by his side, but soon felt so tired himself that he called the hare and asked it to take his place and watch while he slept a little. The hare came and, lying down too, soon felt very sleepy, but he had no one to call in his place, so by degrees he dropped off himself and began to snore. Here, then, were sleeping the princess, the huntsman, the lion, the bear, the wolf, the fox, and the hare, and all were very sound asleep. Meanwhile, the marshal, who had been set to watch below, not seeing the dragon fly away with the princess, and all appearing very quiet, took heart and climbed up the mountain. There lay the dragon, dead and torn in pieces on the ground, and not far off the king's daughter and a huntsman with his beasts, and all reposing in a deep sleep. Now the marshal was very wickedly disposed, and, taking his sword, he cut off the head of the huntsman, and then, taking the maiden under his arm, carried her down the mountain. At this she awoke, terrified, and the marshal cried to her, "You are in my hands. You must say that it was I who have killed the dragon."
"That I cannot," she replied, "for a hunter and his animals did it."
Then he drew his sword and threatened her with death if she did not obey, till at last she was forced to consent. Thereupon he brought her before the king, who went almost beside himself with joy at seeing again his dear daughter, whom he supposed had been torn to pieces by the monster. The marshal told the king that he had killed the dragon and freed the princess and the whole kingdom, and therefore he demanded her for a wife, as it had been promised. The king inquired of his daughter if it were true.
"Ah, yes," she replied, "it must be so, but I make a condition that the wedding shall not take place for a year and a day."
For she thought to herself that perhaps in time she might hear some news of her dear huntsman. Wait, a giant dragon tongues can fit in a handkerchief? It never said it was a giant dragon. And handkerchiefs were pretty big. Once upon a time. Ha ha, pun there. Or a little bit of witty alliteration. Back to the story. But up the dragon's mountain the animals still laid asleep beside their dead master, when presently a great bee came and settled on the hare's nose, but it lifted its paw and brushed it off. The bee came a second time, but the hare brushed it off again and went to sleep. For the third time the bee settled and stung the hare's nose so that it woke quite up. As soon as it had risen and shaken itself, it awoke the fox, and the fox awoke the wolf awoke the bear, and the bear awoke the lion. As soon as the lion got up and saw that the maiden was gone and his dear master dead, he began to roar fearfully and asked, "Who has done this? Bear, why did you not wake me?" The bear asked the wolf, "Why did you not wake me?" The wolf asked the fox, "Why did you not wake me?" And the fox asked the hare, "Why did you not wake me?" The poor hare alone had nothing to answer, and the blame was attached to it, and the others would have fallen upon it, but he begged for his life, saying, "Do not kill me, and I will restore our dear master to life."
I know a hill where grows a root, and he who puts it in his mouth is healed immediately from all diseases or wounds. But this mountain lies 200 hours' journey from hence."
The lion said, "In 24 hours you must go and return here, bringing the root with you."
The hare immediately ran off, and in 24 hours returned with the root in his mouth. Now the lion put the huntsman's head again onto his body, where the hare applied the root to the wound, and immediately the huntsman began to revive, and his heart beat, and life returned. The huntsman now awoke, and was frightened to see the maiden no longer with him, and he thought to himself, "Perhaps she ran away while I slept, to get rid of me." But in his haste, the lion had unluckily set his master's head on the wrong way, but the hunter did not find it out till midday, when he wanted to eat, being so occupied with thinking about the princess. Then, when he wished to help himself, he discovered his head was turned to his back, and, unable to imagine the cause, he asked the animals what had happened to him in his sleep. The lion told him that from weariness they had all gone to sleep, and, on awaking, they had found him dead, with his head cut off, that the hare had fetched the life root, but in his great haste he had turned his head the wrong way, but that he would make it all right again in no time. So saying, he cut off the huntsman's head and turned it round, while the hare healed the wound with the root. After this, the hunter became very moppish, and went about from place to place, letting his animals dance to the people for show. It chanced, after a year's time, that he came again into the same town where he had rescued the princess from the dragon, and this time it was hung all over with scarlet cloth. He asked the landlord of the inn, "What means this? A year ago the city was hung with black crape, and today it is all in red?" The landlord replied, "A year ago our king's daughter was delivered to the dragon, but our marshal fought with it and slew it, and this day their marriage is to be celebrated. Before the town was hung with crape is token of grief and lamentation, but today with scarlet cloth to show our joy." One moment. Take a drink. The next day, when the wedding was to take place, the huntsman said to the landlord, "Believe it or not, mine host, but today I will eat bread at the same table with the king." "Well," said he, "I will wager you 100 pieces that doesn't come true." The huntsman took the bet and laid down his money, and then, calling the hare, he said, "Go, dear jumper, and fetch me a bit of bread, such as the king eats." Now the hare was the smallest, and therefore could not entrust her business to anyone else, but was obliged to make herself ready to go. "Oh," thought it, "if I jump along the streets alone, the butcher's dogs will come out after me." While it stood considering, it happened as it thought, for the dogs came behind and were about to seize it for a choice morsel. But it made a spring, had you but seen it, and escaped into a sentry box without the soldier knowing it. The dogs came and tried to hunt it out, but the soldier, not understanding their sport, beat them off with a club, so they ran howling and barking away. As soon as the hare saw the coast was clear, it ran up to the castle, and, into the room where the princess was, and getting under her stool, began to scratch her foot. The princess said,
"Will you be quiet?"
thinking it was her dog. The hare scratched her foot a second time, and she said again,
"Will you be quiet?"
but the hare would not leave off, and a third time scratched her foot. And now she peeped down and recognized the hare by its necklace. She took it up in her arms and carried it to her chamber, saying,
"Dear hare, what do you want?"
The hare replied,
"My master who killed the dragon is here, and sent me. I am come for a piece of bread, such as the king eats."
At these words she became very glad, and bade her servant bring her a piece of bread, such as the king was accustomed to have. When it was brought, the hare said,
"The baker must carry it for me, or the butcher's dogs will seize it."
So the baker carried it to the door of the inn, where the hare got up on its hind legs, and, taking the bread in its forepaws, carried it to its master. Then the huntsman said, "See here, my host, the 100 gold pieces are mine." The landlord wondered very much, but the huntsman said further, "Yes, I have got the king's bread, and now I will have some of his meat." To this the landlord demurred, but would not bet again, and his guest, calling the fox, said, "My dear fox, go and fetch me some of the meat which the king is to eat today." The fox was more cunning than the hare, and went through the lanes and alleys without seeing a dog, straight to the royal palace, and into the room of the princess, under whose stool it crept. Presently it scratched her foot, and the princess, looking down, recognized the fox with her necklace, and, taking it into her room, she asked,
"What do you want, dear fox?"
It replied,
"My master who killed the dragon is here, and sent me to beg a piece of meat, such as the king will eat today."
The princess summoned the cook, and bade her prepare a dish of meat like the king's, and, when it was ready, carry it for the fox to the door of the inn. There the fox took the dish himself, and, first driving the flies away with a whisk of his tail, carried it to the hunter. "See here, master landlord," said he, "here are the bread and meat. Now I will have some of the same vegetables as the king eats." He called the wolf and said, "Dear wolf, go and fetch me some vegetables the same as the king eats today." The wolf went straight to the castle like a person who feared nobody, and when it came into the princess's chamber, it plucked at her clothes behind, so that she looked round. The maiden knew the wolf by its necklace, and took it with her into her room, and said,
"Dear wolf, what do you want?"
The beast replied, "My master who killed the dragon is here, and has sent me for some vegetables like those the king eats today." Then she bade the cook prepare a dish of vegetables the same as the king's, and carry it to the inn door for the wolf, who took it of her and bore it in to his master. The hunter said, "See here, my host, now I have bread, meat, and vegetables the same as the king's, but I will also have the same sweetmeats." Then he called to the bear, "Dear bear, go and fetch me some sweetmeats like those the king has for his dinner today, for you like sweet things." The bear rolled along up to the castle, while everyone got out of his way, but when he came to the guard, he pointed his gun at him and would not let him pass into the royal apartments. The bear, however, got up on his hind legs, and gave the guard right and left boxes on the ears with his paw, which knocked him down, and thereupon he went straight to the room of the princess, and, getting behind her, growled slightly. She looked round and perceived the bear, whom she took into her own chamber, and asked him what he came for.
"My master who slew the dragon is here," said he, "and he has sent me for some sweetmeats such as the king eats."
The princess let the sugar baker be called, and bade him prepare the sweetmeats like those the king had, and carry them for the bear to the inn. There the bear took charge of them, and, first licking off the sugar, which had boiled over, he took them into his master.
"See here, friend landlord," said the huntsman. "Now I have bread, meat, vegetables, and sweetmeats from the table of the king. But I mean also to drink his wine."
He called the lion and said,
"Dear lion, I should be glad to have a draught. Go and fetch me some wine like the king drinks."
The lion strode through the town, where all the people made way for him, and soon came to the castle, where the watchmen attempted to stop him at the gates, but, just giving a little bit of a roar, they were so frightened that they all ran away. He walked on to the royal apartments, and knocked with his tail at the door, and, when the princess opened it, she was at first frightened to see a lion, but soon recognizing him by the gold snap of her necklace, which he wore, she took him into her room and asked,
"Dear lion, what do you wish?"
The lion replied,
"My master who killed the dragon is here, and has sent me to fetch him wine like that the king drinks at his own table."
The princess summoned the butler and told him to give the lion wine such as the king drank. But the lion said,
"I will go down with you and see that I have the right."
So he went with the butler, and, as they were come below, he was about to draw the ordinary wine, such as was drunk by the king's servants, but the lion cried,
"Hold! I will first taste the wine."
And, drawing for himself half a cupful, he drank it, and said,
"No, that is not the real wine."
The butler looked at him askance, and went to draw from another mask, which was made for the king's marshal. Then the lion cried,
"Hold! First I must taste."
And, drawing half a flagon full, he drank it off, and said,
"This is better, but still not the right wine."
At these words the butler put himself in a passion, and said,
"What does a stupid calf as you know about wine?"
The lion gave him a blow behind the ear, so that he fell down upon the ground, and, as soon as he came to himself, he led the lion quite submissively into a peculiar little cellar where the king's wine was kept, of which no one ever dared to taste. But the lion, first drawing for himself half a cupful, tried the wine, and saying,
"This must be the real stuff,"
bade the butler fill 6 bottles with it. When this was done, they mounted the steps again, and as the lion came out of the cellar into the fresh air, he reeled about, being a little elevated, so that the butler had to carry the wine basket for him to the inn, where the lion, taking it again in his mouth, carried it in to his master. The hunter called the landlord and said,
"See here! Now I have bread, meat, vegetables, sweetmeats, and wine, the very same as the king himself will eat today, and so I will make my dinner with my animals."
They sat down and ate and drank away, for he gave the hare, the fox, the wolf, the bear, and the lion their share of the good things, and was very happy, for he felt the king's daughter still loved him. When he had finished his meal, he said to the landlord, "Now, as I have eaten and drunk the same things as the king, I will even go to the royal palace and marry the princess." The landlord said, "How can that be? For she is already betrothed, and today the wedding is to be celebrated." Then the hunter drew out the handkerchief which the king's daughter had given him on the dragon's mountain, and wherein the 7 tongues of the dragon's 7 heads were wrapped, and said, "This shall help me to do it." The landlord looked at the handkerchief and said, "If I believe all that has been done, I still cannot believe that, and will wager my house and garden upon it." Thereupon the huntsman took out a purse with 1,000 gold pieces in it, and said, "I will bet you that against your house and garden." Meantime the king asked his daughter, "What do all these wild beasts mean who have come to you today, and passed and repassed in and out of my castle?" She replied, "I dare not tell you, but send and let the master of these beasts be fetched, and you will do well." The king sent a servant to the inn to invite the strange man to come, and arrived just as the hunter had concluded his wager with the landlord. So he said, "See, mine host, the king even sends a servant to invite me to come, but I do not go yet." And to the servant he said, "I beg that the king will send me royal clothes and a carriage with 6 horses and servants to wait on me." When the king heard his answer, he said to his daughter, "What shall I do?" "Do as he desires, and you will do well," she replied. So the king sent a suit of royal clothes, a carriage with 6 horses, and some servants to wait upon the man. As the hunter saw them coming, he said to the landlord, "See here, I am fetched just as I desired." And, putting on the royal clothes, he took the handkerchief with him and drove to the king. When the king saw him coming, he asked his daughter how he should receive him, and she said, "Go out to meet him, and you will do well." So the king met him and led him into the palace. The animals following, the king showed him a seat near himself and his daughter, and the marshal sat upon the other side as the bridegroom. Now against the walls was the 7-headed dragon placed, stuffed as if he were yet alive. And the king said, "The 7 heads of the dragon were cut off by our marshal, to whom this day I give my daughter in marriage." Then the hunter rose up, and, opening the 7 jaws of the dragon, asked where were the 7 tongues. This frightened the marshal, and he turned pale as death. But at last, not knowing what else to say, he stammered out, "Dragons have no tongues." The hunter replied, "Liars should have none, but the dragon's tongues are the trophies of the dragon slayer." And so saying, he unwrapped the handkerchief, and there lay all 7. And he put one into each mouth of the monster, and they fitted exactly. Then he took the handkerchief upon which her name was marked, and showed it to the maiden, and asked her to whom she had given it. And she replied, "To him who slew the dragon." Then he called his beasts, and taking from each the necklace, and from the lion the golden snap, he put them together, and showing them to the princess too, asked her to whom they belonged. The princess said,
"The necklace and the snap were mine, and I shared it among the animals who helped to conquer the dragon."
Then the huntsman said, "When I was weary and rested after the fight, the marshal came and cut off my head, and then took away the princess, and gave out that it was he who had conquered the dragon. Now that he has lied, I show these tongues, this necklace, and his handkerchief for proofs." And then he related how the beasts had cured him with a wonderful root, and that for a year he had wandered and at last come hither again, where he had discovered the deceit of the marshal through the innkeeper's tale. Then the king asked his daughter, "Is it true this man killed the dragon?"
"Yes,"
she replied.
"it is true, for I dared not disclose the treachery of the marshal, because he threatened me with instant death. But now it is known without my mention, and for this reason I have delayed the wedding a year and a day."
After these words, the king ordered 12 counselors to be summoned, who should judge the marshal, and they condemned him to be torn in pieces by 4 oxen. So the marshal was executed, and the king gave his daughter to the huntsman, and named him stadholder over all his kingdoms. The wedding was celebrated with great joy, and the young king caused his father and foster father to be brought to him, and loaded them with presents. He did not forget either the landlord, but bade him welcome, and said to him, "See here, my host, I have married the daughter of the king, and thy house and garden are mine." The landlord said that was according to right, but the young king said, "It shall be according to mercy." And he gave him back not only his house and garden, but also presented him with 1,000 gold pieces he had wagered. Now the young king and queen were very happy, and lived together in contentment. He often went out hunting because he delighted in it, and the faithful animals always accompanied him. In the neighborhood there was a forest, which it was said was haunted, and that, if one entered, he did not easily get out again. The young king, however, took a great fancy to hunt in it, and he let the old king have no peace till he consented to let him. Away then he rode with a great company, and as he approached the forest, he saw a snow-white hind, a deer, going into it. So telling his companions to wait his return, he rode off among the trees, and only his faithful beasts accompanied him. The courtiers waited and waited till evening, but he did not return. So they rode home and told the young queen that her husband had ridden to the forest after a white doe, and had not come again out. The news made her very anxious about him. He, however, had ridden further and further into the wood after the beautiful animal without catching it, and when he thought it was within range of his gun, with one spring it got away, till at last it disappeared altogether. Then he remarked for the first how deeply he had plunged into the thickets, and, taking his horn, he gave a blast, but there was no answer, for his people could not hear it. Presently night began to close in, and, perceiving that he could not get home that day, he dismounted, and, making a fire, prepared to pass the night. While he sat by the fire with his beasts lying all around him, he thought he heard a human voice, but, on looking round, he could see nobody. soon after he heard again a groan, as if from a box, and, looking up, he saw an old woman sitting upon the tree, who was groaning and crying. "Oh, oh, oh, how I do freeze!" He called out, "Come down and warm yourself if you freeze." But she said, "No, your beasts will bite me." He replied, "They will not harm you, my good lady, if you like to come down." But she was a witch, and said, "I will throw you down a twig, which if you beat on their backs they will do nothing to me." He did as he was requested, and immediately they laid down quietly enough, for they were changed into stones. Now, when the old woman was safe from the animals, she sprang down, and, touching the king too with a twig, converted him also into a stone. Thereupon she laughed to herself, and buried him and his beasts in a grave, where already were many more stones. Meanwhile, the young queen was becoming more and more anxious and sad when her husband did not return. And just then it happened that the other brother, who had traveled towards the east when they separated, came into the territory. He had been seeking and had found no service to enter, and was, therefore, traveling through the country, and making his animals dance for a living. Once he thought he would go and look at the knife which they had struck in the tree at their separation, in order to see how his brother fared. When he looked at it, lo, his brother's side was half rusty and half bright. At this he was frightened, and thought his brother had fallen to some great misfortune, but he hoped yet to save him, for one half of the knife was bright. He therefore went with his beasts towards the west, and, as he came to the capital city, the watch went out to him and asked if he should mention his arrival to his bride, for the young queen had for 2 days been in great sorrow and distress at his absence, and feared he had been killed in the enchanted wood. The watchman thought certainly he was no one else than the young king, for he was so much like him, and had also the same wild beasts returning after him. The huntsman perceived he was speaking of his brother, and thought it was all for the best that he should give himself out as his brother, for so, perhaps, he might more easily save him. So he let himself be conducted by the watchman into the castle, and was there received with great joy, for the young queen took him for her husband also, and asked him where he had stopped so long. He told her he had lost his way in a wood, and could not find his way out earlier. For a couple of days he rested at home, but was always asking about the enchanted wood. And at last he said, "I must hunt there once more." The king and the young queen tried to dissuade him, but he was resolved, and went out with a great number of attendants. One moment, chat. Gotta take a drink. As soon as he got into the wood, it happened to him as to his brother. He saw a white hind, and told his people to wait his return where they were, while he hunted the wild animal, and immediately rode off, his beasts following his footsteps. But he could not catch the hind any more than his brother, and he went so deep into the wood that he was forced to pass the night there. As soon as he had made a fire, he heard someone groaning above him, and saying, "Oh, oh, oh, how I do freeze!" Then he looked up, and there sat the same old witch in the tree, and he said to her, "If you freeze, old woman,
Why don't you come down and warm yourself?" She replied,
"No, your beasts would bite me. But if you would beat them with a twig, which I will throw down to you, they can do me no harm."
When the hunter heard this, he doubted the old woman, and said to her,
"I do not beat my beasts, so come down, or I will fetch you." But she called out,
"What are you thinking of? You can do nothing to me."
He answered, "Come down, or I will shoot you."
The old woman laughed and said,
"Shoot away! I am not afraid of your bullets."
He knelt down and shot, but she was bulletproof, and, laughing till she yelled, called out,
"You cannot catch me!"
However, the hunter knew a trick or two, and, tearing 3 silver buttons from his coat, he loaded his gun with them, and while he was ramming them down, the old witch threw herself from the tree with a loud shriek, for she was not proof against such shot. He placed his foot upon her neck and said, "Old witch, if you do not quickly tell me where my brother is, I will tie your hands together and throw you into the fire." She was in great anguish, begged for mercy, and said,
"He lies with his beasts in a grave turned into stone."
Then he forced her to go with him, threatening her and saying, "You old cat, now turn my brother and all the creatures which lie here into their proper forms, or I will throw you into the fire." The old witch took a twig and changed the stone back to what it was, and immediately his brother and the beasts stood before the huntsman, as well as many merchants, workpeople, and shepherds, who, delighted with their freedom, returned home. But the twin brothers, when they saw each other again, kissed and embraced, and were very glad. They seized the old witch, bound her, and laid her on the fire, and, when she was consumed, the forest itself disappeared, and all was clear and free from trees, so that one could see the royal palace 3 miles off. Hi, GPP. Now the 2 brothers went together home, and on the way told each other their adventures, and when the younger one said he was lord over the whole land in place of the king, the other one said, "All that I was aware of. When I went into the city, I was taken for you, and all kingly honor was paid to me, the young queen even mistaking me for her true husband, and making me sit at her table and sleep in her room." When the first one heard this, he became very angry, and so jealous and passionate that, drawing his sword, he cut off the head of his brother. But as soon as he had done so, and saw the red blood flowing from the dead body, he repented sorely and said, "My brother has saved me, and I have killed him for doing so." And he groaned painfully. Just then the hare came up and offered to fetch the healing root, and then, running off, brought it just at the right time, so that the dead man was restored to life again, and not even the mark of his wound was to be seen. After this adventure they went on, and the younger brother said, "You see, we have both got our royal robes, and have both the same beasts following us. We will, therefore, enter the city at opposite gates, and arrive from the 2 quarters the same time before the king." So they separated, and at the same moment the watchman from each gate came to the king, and informed him that the young prince with the beasts had returned from the hunt. The king said, "It is not possible, for your 2 gates are a mile asunder." But But in the meantime, the two brothers had arrived in the castle yard and began to mount the stairs. When they entered, the king said to his daughter, "Tell me which is your husband, for one appears to me the same as the other. I cannot tell." The princess was in great trouble. I could not tell which was which, but at last she bethought herself of the necklace which she had given to the beasts, and she looked and found on one of the lions her golden snap. And then she cried exultingly,
"He whom this lion belongs is my rightful husband."
Then the young king laughed and said, "That's right." And they sat down together at table and ate and drank and were merry. At night, when the young king went to bed, his wife asked him why he had placed on the 2 previous nights a sword in the bed, for she thought it was to kill her. Then the young king knew how faithful his brother had been. Thus ends the tale of the 2 brothers. With that, chat, it's getting pretty late for me, so I am going to call it there. And we are going to find somebody to raid into. So let us see whom we can raid. Oh, Lulu Lasso is playing some Fallout New Vegas. That sounds fun. So let's see if we can raid into her. We can. So we'll give a quick shout out to Lulu. That's over on the Twitch side. So if you haven't, go check her out. I want to thank y'all for coming out. And I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.